Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're exploring how a remote 500-acre desert ranch in Utah became the absolute epicenter of a massive, decade-long scientific investigation into the paranormal. We are looking at a piece of land so notoriously bizarre, it actually triggered an exhaustive study by highly trained, deeply skeptical scientists. Now, this isn't your standard campfire ghost story. We're talking about a meticulous, data-driven look into an enigma that literally defies our basic understanding of reality.
You might be wondering, how does a dusty patch of dirt become the most scrutinized paranormal spot on Earth? Well, we aren't just looking at unverified rumors today. This is a documented mystery that baffled skeptical PhDs. Usually, when the scientific community hears about high strangeness, they just roll their eyes and walk away. But here, an entire all-star team of researchers converged on this one single location and spent 10 solid years studying it around the clock. And the findings from that decade of research, absolutely mind-blowing.
Let's start with Section 1, the Skinwalker Curse. To really understand the modern investigation, we kind of have to step back in time first. Legend claims that the Navajo tribe, who were being captured and sold into slavery by the Utes tribe, enacted this incredibly dark curse before they were forced off the land. The story goes that they called upon witches to inhabit the bodies of large predators, like massive wolves and foxes, to perpetually terrorize anyone living on that cursed ground. This ancient legend basically set a horrifying precedent for what was to come centuries later, when a modern family tried to make this exact land their home.
Which brings us to Section 2, the unkillable wolf encounter. Fast forward to 1994. Terry and Gwen Sherman bought this abandoned property well below market value. They were thrilled, 500 acres of open space for their cattle to roam. For a ranching family, it was the ultimate dream. But imagine moving into your new dream home only to find deadbolts on the inside and the outside of every single door, even the interior doors. And out front, massive chains strung to iron pikes driven deep into the dirt, clearly meant to hold some impossibly strong guard dogs. The Shermans kind of just brushed this off as previous owner paranoia, but, well, they were about to learn exactly why those locks were there.
On literally their very first day unloading the moving trucks, the Shermans found themselves dealing with an impossibly large predator that totally defied the laws of physics. A massive wolf, over 6 feet long, just meanders out of the woods in broad daylight. At first, it actually acts domesticated. It's wagging its tail, even letting Terry's father pet it. But in a flash, it snaps its jaws completely around a calf's head. Terry grabs his high-powered rifle and shoots the wolf multiple times. His son actually hits it with an axe, and it has absolutely zero impact. No way, right? When they finally track the beast into a muddy patch of forest, its footprints simply stop. It just vanished into thin air.
And the family reported that after this unkillable beast vanished, it left behind this visceral, metallic, rotting stench that would become a terrifying calling card. It was a completely unnatural, chemical odor hanging heavy in the air. A pretty clear signal that whatever they were dealing with was absolutely not a normal animal of this earth.
Moving right along to Section 3, escalating paranormal activity.
After that initial encounter, the phenomena rapidly multiplied, and it pushed the family to their absolute breaking point. Gwen would unpack groceries only to find them packed right back into the bags minutes later. Terry's 70-pound fence-digging tool completely vanished, only to be found days later strung up 70 feet high in a tree. During winter, massive cattle would leave tracks in the snow that, just like the wolf, abruptly vanished. Terry even encountered a silent craft resembling a mini stealth fighter jet hovering 20 feet up, scanning the ground with multicolored lights. But honestly, the most horrifying event was when Terry sent his 3 guard dogs to chase a terrifying blue orb into the woods. The next day, he found nothing left of them but 3 circular stacks of vaporized ash. It just gets crazier. Terry described looking through his high-powered rifle scope one night and seeing this impossible orange portal hovering in the complete darkness. But inside the oval portal, it was broad daylight with a bright blue sky. He watched in pure horror as a faceless black humanoid entity crawled out of the portal, literally like a scene from a nightmare, and just scurried off into his property.
Okay, Section 4, the scientific investigation begins.
At their absolute limit, terrified and exhausted, the Shermans finally sold the ranch to billionaire Robert Bigelow. Bigelow immediately deployed the National Institute for Discovery Science, or NIDS for short.
Now, Bigelow intentionally hired highly skeptical PhDs, and their first order of business was to rule out literally every mundane explanation. For an entire year, they rigorously tested the local plants for hallucinogenic spores, they screened the water supply, and they conducted extensive psychological evaluations on the family. They wanted to prove this was all just a grand illusion. But after a year of intense testing, these skeptical scientists came to a chilling conclusion: the Shermans were completely sane, and whatever was happening out there was entirely real.
That takes us to Section 5, Evidence of High Strangeness.
Once the team concluded the Shermans weren't hallucinating, the phenomena turned its attention squarely onto the researchers, bringing a level of sheer absurdity. I'm talking about a newborn calf found surgically dissected in broad daylight, while researchers were just yards away. Zero blood left behind, and the ear tag cleanly removed. In another instance, 4 massive, prized bulls vanished, only to be found impossibly cramped together inside a tiny, unused trailer. What's truly baffling here is that they were completely calm, kind of in a trance-like state, and the trailer was still physically wired shut from the outside with the cobwebs around the door perfectly intact. On top of that, researchers mapping magnetic fields reported their compass needles aggressively locking onto that same foul, rotting metallic smell instead of magnetic north. How do you even explain that?
The impartial tension here is just incredible. Picture this. It's 1997, and you have highly trained scientists completely frozen in fear. They're hiding out on a mountain ridgeline when an orange portal materializes in thin air right in front of them. Looking through infrared goggles, they watch as a massive, black, human-like creature crawls out onto the dirt, sprints up the mountain, and bounds directly past them, like just 30 feet away. The scientists heard the shale crunching under its massive feet and smelled that horrific, rotting chemical odor washing right over them.
Let's look at Section 6, an unsolved mystery.
So despite all of this direct observation by trained professionals, the NIDS team ultimately hit a frustrating wall. Whatever was operating on the ranch basically decided to quiet down. After those dramatic encounters in 1997, the activity abruptly and significantly declined in 98. The team stuck around, running their equipment, walking the property, but by 2004 they finally pulled the plug. They simply couldn't gather the definitive, repeatable, hard data required by the strict scientific method. The researchers were left holding this massive mountain of circumstantial evidence. They had hundreds of eyewitness accounts from actual PhDs, documented magnetic anomalies, and physical proof of surgical mutilations on cattle. But remember, we're talking about the late 90s and early 2000s. Nobody had an iPhone in their pocket ready to go. They completely lacked undeniable, hard photographic proof of the creatures themselves. The scientists eventually left with a profound sense of psychological defeat. They concluded they were dealing with an entity, or maybe a group of entities, that was always deliberately one step ahead of them, entirely dictating the terms of the encounter.
So I want to leave you with this final thought to take away from our explainer today. You have a property steeped in ancient curses, terrifying physical evidence of unkillable predators, and a decade of rigorous study by brilliant scientists who walked away with more questions than answers. Based on all the structured data, the vanished livestock, and those terrifying ridge-run encounters, what do you truly believe happened out there in the Utah desert? Is reality just way stranger than we are willing to admit, or is there another explanation?